now is 6:34. I'm Chairman Mike Curry, and I'd like to call this Board of Selectmen workshop to order on the 16th day of October 2019. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Before we begin, I'd like to state for the record the entire proceeding this evening, except any executive sessions, which we don't have any planned, are being recorded for both TCTV Cable Station 8 and TCTV YouTube channel. I don't see anyone else recording. No? Okay. I really don't need for it, but thanks for letting us know if you do. All right. This evening, we have one agenda item. We're basically going to spend the evening talking about our budget crisis, or basically the plan as we proceed into the 22nd of October, which is our third, I think fourth?
Yeah.
I
Three
think-
no's, well, no.
It's the third.
The third.
Third.
Yeah.
It's just
It's
Yep.
the third.
third. First no was in May.
And hopefully final. I would love to be able to get some kind of resolution so we do not march towards the December 1st timeframe. So that is our only agenda item tonight. 3 items: information sought, which we did last week. This board's position and any discussion on the proposed $19.786 million district budget, and as a resulting process to begin the conversation of the process or potential of cutting the town's budget should we not find a way out of this mess. I believe, I'm trying to remember off your board, Carter, I believe we have a series of dates in November that we're already forecasting out to talk through the proposed cut process. This board promised I believe it was the last special town meeting, and it was before the first joint town meeting, we promised that any cuts were going to be done, proposed, discussed, and then recommended for execution in front of, as a public process, so everyone understood what was going on. And
If we could just perhaps not use the word
execute.
execution. Staff nervous enough.
You got that, absolutely,
Implement.
thank you. Implement. And just to, we have Bob from the advisory committee tonight, and, we're looking for their input as well. It's going to be a joint effort to kind of talk through these things, and everyone's got ideas. We want to make sure that we talk through the entire process rather than actually just act in a vacuum, and no one wants that. Okay, so for this evening, again, we said that there was information sought. Carter, do you have any, I know that we sent out at least 2 requests for information.
Yep, so what I've done, and on the second page, we do have some fall town meeting topics to try to work through also, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
So what I've done is I took the agenda for tonight, tried to kind of expand it as a bit of a checklist, and then I'll be referring you to documents that were pulled together today, coming out of my meeting both with Jeff of yesterday and then with the superintendent midday today.
Okay.
So the first question that came about on motion from Jeff was to request the materials that had been supplied to the State Department of Elementary and Secondary Education on how they came to set the 1/12 budget. So we sent that request off both to the school district and to the DESI. And Jeff actually gets the answers from them. I think he's got a better pipeline at this point. Jeff gets his answers, I think, like a day before I do. But the bottom line here was their response was, well, your FY '20 budget was lower than your FY '19 budget, so we just gave you 1/12 of the FY '20 budget. And we went back and said, but the only reason is because there's about $1.5 million of debt that went off the books, which isn't in '20s. And they came back and said, yeah, but that's what we do, and that would all get sorted out in December if it needs to be. So the problem with that is that if they had, so by doing that, the school district got a budget of about $1.12 million bigger than if DESI had stuck with the FY '18 operating budget. And so if you look at the third page in your packet, when you look at it, you can see that the debt service is all below the operating budget line. You can see the $18,674,000, and then you see the MSBA reimbursement and the debt service for Templeton and the debt service for Phillips.
Can I
So-
interject?
Yep.
This packet was, I was trying to get online. Is this packet online? Tonight's agenda packet?
I can put it there tomorrow morning, but
Okay.
no, I
Just,
met with
yeah,
Jeff
people wanted to
yesterday
follow
and then
along with, like,
the
phones.
chairman today.
And I didn't do public comment. Did anyone plan on having a public comment? Usually I open the meetings with that. Not that I want to interject on what Carter was, but I just wanted to say, if you had a public comment, if you wanted to come up to the microphone and you had a statement or something like that, I'll find a spot in the agenda to do that. Sorry, Carter, please.
So, what happens here was in July 1, the school district got their budget, 1/10 of FY '20, and they chose to expend to that level. Whereas we've retrenched, we didn't fill the highway, we had the vacancy in the council on agent, we didn't fill it. Chief Dickey took preemptive action to cut back. We left the vacancy in the police department. So that's how it came to 1/12. And what the state is saying is, if you get to us by December 1, we will consult with you, we'll consult with everybody, and it all gets sorted out at that point. The challenge there, if I might, is that if DESI now sets the budget below the 19.786, if they look at this and say, for giggles, okay, last year you had 18.7, and we'll give you, I'm just using numbers for illustration, 250,000 because you opened a new school, and 250,000 because health insurance went up, and 250,000 because the union contract went up. That comes to like 19.45 million. So I think that all of us certainly want to try to get through this on Tuesday, hopefully, because the schools and us just keep getting deeper into the fiscal year. And the deeper you get, the harder it is to make those cuts up. So that's the answer from the state, 1/12 of the fiscal budget for '20, because the fiscal budget for '20 was lower than the school budget of '19.
Any reactions? Nothing?
No, just, just a little question about the 1/12 budget based off the 20, but it is what it is, so.
Okay.
I didn't hear what he said. Could you repeat
He
that
said,
for me?
he just said, he had a question based on the 1/12 budget. I mean, you're basically stating the fact to say, how do we get here, so we're really going through? Do you want, Sean's signaling to you?
Motioning to me.
Yeah.
Can I have that, please? Thank you.
So how do I distill this information down? So 19.7, got it, moving forward.
When they go to set the budget on December 1, then they would have to give serious consideration I think they just missed it. I don't know what happened.
Okay.
But
And you're also saying, based on that, this request for information, we're also identifying that as we are also affected, waiting to make cuts, they also can be affected when December 1st hits and they, I don't know, for lack of a better term, reevaluate their budget.
well, they'll be in worse shape than us
Yeah.
because we have been
19.45.
preemptively leaving things
Yes.
vacant or trying to constrain. We've had some things go wrong as well, which I'm sure they have as well, but we've kind of constrained, whereas they have spent on a planned budget to the max.
Right, and they've been public about that, actually. I think they had questions in their last school committee meeting, or they told the public, we have been executing in accordance with our 1/12 budget.
Yes.
I reported
Again.
on that.
Yes,
I reported on that
Yep.
when I came back from the
keep
school
using the
committee
word
meeting.
execution, sorry.
Yeah, that's probably not a good
I
term
know.
to use.
It's the military, I mean, you got a couple military
I
guys on the board,
gotcha.
I'm sorry.
I gotcha.
I've been told, Terry said, by using the word bomb, I think
Dropped
last
a
week,
bomb.
yeah.
I said, that's a hard sell.
So now it's a Hail Mary for what I recommended. So, so the 2 points out of that, again, this is, we can spend a little bit of time on discussion this evening. The 19.7, how we got to that, and the fact that 1 December doesn't mean gloom and doom for us. Although we have to be prepared, to set up a contingency plan, and that's what I talked about. We're gonna spend the whole next month working on publicly, but the school, in your meeting today, did that fact resonate with Dr. Casavant?
I have tried to drive home
Okay.
that if we don't have a budget, we've scheduled the classification hearing for, I think, November 26th, if I remember correctly. And our hope would be to then be able to immediately send off our recap sheet. Because working backwards, those tax bills must be postmarked by the last day of December. If they are not,
Yeah.
we can go ahead and mail them, but nobody has to pay until May 1. We are at people's
gosh.
goodwill and mercy for the February 1 due date. And if we get there, we've been in a reasonably good cash position, whatever anyone thinks of our free cash policies and working capital and all the rest of it. But missing an entire quarter of collections, we would have to sit collectively and think about, do we need a tax anticipation note? And those are not free. You have to pay for those as well. So that means not only are you not getting your collection, but your budget has to go up somewhat to pay for that note.
Right. Well, the second part, so that 19.45 number, I think is, again, discussion-wise.
And that was just for illustration.
Oh, I understand, but I think it drives so we were very upfront to talk about, in the beginning of the budget process, we were talking about $250,000 worth of cuts in the beginning of this based on the rest of the year. And that's implementing the budget from the start. My issue, the point I'm trying to make is, if we go on through time, those cuts have to be larger, right? For the school also, not making those cuts, one of the central discussion items that I see in the public, whether it's in this meeting or not, or in the online discussions that I've been watching, is that the predominant view is that if we get to the 1st of December, that the schools are going to continue with what they're doing, that there's not the possibility that that bad things could happen, it goes the other direction, that they're not gonna have enough money actually DESI comes in and says, you're over. I think we've seen scenarios of about 20 to 30% over what the minimum level contribution is. And I know we've discussed that, the difference between what DESI says is supposed to be 15 mil and what our actual budget is, which is 19 or 20 million dollars. So I just want to make sure that we understand that going forward, that December 1st, now as we look at it and have some numbers in front of us, does not mean roses for somebody. It could mean something far worse. Carter, on the agenda, you've got some items here. I'll go through them. We just talked about the budget. Free cash, on our last meeting, the Hail Mary course of action that I was talking about was the use of free cash. I think so my position was, and I'm going down through the sheet so we can at least have the discussion. My position was, I viewed this as a unique situation where we were able to leverage a unique opportunity that we're opening a school. Watching the school budget or reading the PDF slides that they had briefed to us, there were costs within opening and reconfiguring to a new school that I thought we could leverage to say, let's try and take care of this emergency situation. I'm using the word emergency as a unique word here, to say the school's opening for FY20. I would like to be able to help the school and understand what the costs are of using free cash in accordance with our financial management policy. And in doing that, I said our capital budget is going to be substantially reduced, if not to the point where we would only have a few $100,000, if that, to be able to execute on capital purchases. This past year was excellent for our capital budget. We had dispersion across all departments, and it was the way we should see things in Templeton. If this year we were able to agree on that and say this is an appropriate use of a one-time because it's of the unique situation it is, then it basically shows to the department heads we're willing to do something to basically rescue the town from having this dire cuts and everything else that we don't want to have happen, but that how it impacts their capital budget, which would be to reduce it. Any kind of capital plan, everyone understands the capital plan is based on our life cycle for all the equipment that we have. We are supposed to be doing things in FY20 based on that budget, all the forecasts that we have. So the police department believes that they are going to be recycling a vehicle. The DPW has ideas. All of the department heads are saying, our voting machines last year, we were able to take care of that because it was a planned obsolescence issue. We would not be doing that this year based on what I'm proposing. So going down through the item here, free cash, I think it's been certified just north of $1 million, $1.1 million, $1.2 million, $1.4 million. I absolutely, before anything else, would make the mandatory deposits into CapEx insurance. There's three mandatory.
We have OpEx, CapEx, and OPEB. And I have a proposed distribution sheet in here for you when we get to the fall town meeting articles.
So after we made the appropriate contributions to those accounts, and then we wind up looking at the rest, as our process looks at it, we say, we have this amount to put towards capital. At that point, I would say, that chunk right there, I want to use for this school, and the emergency, I would hope that we would say, we want to use that for this emergency situation, which has really got the town on edge. That doesn't mean that we're not gonna be on edge next year, but at least we have that task in front of us. So that was my idea that was my proposal for free cash as we kind of talk through these things. Last meeting, I came up with courses of action. We came up with a few at the end of the meeting. I'd like to do the same thing, but along the way, basically add any comments that we have as the board, anything that Carter has kind of provided the detail on, and if we have any consideration from our audience tonight, I'd be happy to listen to that.
So you sent me off to try to determine if there were some items in the school budget that you might backfill while remaining faithful to the financial
Yes.
management policies. And I sent you the copy of what I sent up to the school district. And respectfully, I have to disagree with the characterization of this year as crisis or emergency.
Okay.
There is nothing in the FY '20 school budget that the superintendent could identify that will not be in the FY '21 budget. It's not as if you paid, and the example I've used is, it's not as if you paid Mullen Mayflower $200,000 to move from the schools
Yep.
here, and next year, you're moved and you're done. That's a one-time, okay, pay for that with free cash and you're able to
Yeah.
stick with your policy.
Jeez.
This
Yeah,
budget this year
same.
will, for all practical purposes, simply be adjusted next year by inflation factors, new positions that are needed, and real-world experience in operating the budget. There's nothing that the superintendent was able to identify that goes away. He called me on Friday. We spent quite a bit of time over the phone, and he says, I don't understand how this works. And I said, well, let me use the 2000 downturn where state aid got cut by 20%. My board, similar to your policy, allowed me to use a little over 300,000 in year one, right around 200,000 in year two, 100,000 in year three, and then zero. Because we could look at what we thought the state economy was going to do, and we could say, okay, they're here, but normal economic trends are we start to get this growth after a recession, and we think that within year four we'll be out of it. And the board said, okay, you believe those estimates? And yes, I do.
Right.
If you believe the assumptions, I believe the estimates. I said, that's the kind of thing that we're talking about. And when he came in today, he truly had nothing that fit that. So in terms of using some free cash at the beginning of the fiscal year to build and support the operating budget, there was nothing substantive, no economic downturn, no single item that would allow the use of free cash and be in compliance with your policy. That's ultimately your decision to do.
Right.
But my sense was we were trying to figure out a way to backfill them and support them while remaining somewhat faithful to the policy.
Yeah, it changed, as we were reading, we had copies of the financial management policy in front of us our last meeting, and, I know that they were working towards it, and they formally came to you today and said, we've got nothing in here that we can attribute to an emergency cost. I was looking in between the lines within our policy to say, is it just enough to say, I'm using this because of the emergency situation? Just the mere fact that we had a reconfiguration as the emergency. I was looking for some way to be able to do that. If I seem overly optimistic, is because I want to be for this FY. I want to get it through for this year. And I understand the immense stone, the Sisyphus, I understand the immense stone that we are trying to push up this hill when we consider what their rising costs are. So, is it our decision? I agree that it is, but I would not want to move forward if it was going to be a wildly unpopular item that was just, you know, in the view of many of the, even before we started talking about what situation could we leverage for it, that it's not an appropriate use of free cash.
Sorry for your disappointment.
Do you have any input on it, or do you have it, it's not dead?
I thought of something, I don't know how appropriate it is, I was gonna save it for the meeting, but at a previous meeting, someone asked the same question I asked myself. How do we create a win-win situation? Some people might think it's a no-brainer. So I've been racking my brains, and I'm brand new, but I came to the conclusion that the town finances and reputation have to come first. There are financial truths that are timeless, and we can't afford to live fiscal year to fiscal year. I put paycheck to paycheck. Our bond rating is mediocre. That doesn't help us. We also have debt to pay down, so, so if Templeton's finances are in good order, then it becomes a safe, affordable place for everybody to live. We need to bring up our bond rating and pay our debt down. And what else were my thoughts? I was gonna say something to the young adults that it's one thing to give them an education, it's another to keep them home in Templeton and make it a safe and affordable place for them to live. And I think that we have to make the hard decision now, and I'm awfully sorry. I actually am gonna meet with Noel Francis tomorrow. I've been conversing with Narissa Whalen, trying to get her perspective. It's a website, she's a regional school district. It support Mass regional schools.
Okay.
And so she can pull up information at the drop of a hat, and she's trying to help me when I meet with Noel tomorrow. I don't know what's gonna come of it. I'm just trying to be proactive, because I've read things online as well, and it just seems like this is an ongoing situation for Templeton. Before we even became, well, we are running out of time, but this didn't happen overnight, and it isn't the first time it's happened. And a lot of it does have to do with the state and communicating with the state that there's,
Right.
regional schools are in trouble, and he had mentioned the Bump Act, and she sent it to me, because I tried to find it and I couldn't find it, and I'm reading it, and it does make sense. She's saying, Susanna Bump in 2017 is saying everything that is right in front of our faces. And it's been 2 years since she wrote that. She's the auditor for the state, and it's been 2 years since she wrote that, and nothing's been acted upon. We're trying to change the language for the transportation bill, to get it. I have it in here, what the language is, and what Jeff was saying, as reasonable. We're trying to get that reasonable out of there so that we can get 100%. I want to help the schools too, is basically what I'm saying. I want to help the schools, but in my position, the town has to come first. We have to think long-term and get our reputation up, build our bond rating up, and pay down our debt. And
Okay, what are we gonna do on Tuesday? That's what I wanna figure it out. I think
Same
that a
number.
lot of these strategic things, I think they're a great idea, and, for everyone in the room, what was the name? Sorry.
Narissa Whalen?
Nope.
Oh, Susan Bump?
No, the gentleman that you're gonna meet, he wrote a
Noel
message.
Francis?
Yeah.
Francis.
I say that's a citizen's effort to earn cash, basically saying, hey, he said, either you're going to, I would like you to figure out as a board, how to send forward these requests for, I use the term earmarks, which probably puts that picture in your head better than anything else, to say to the state, hey, how about an extra $300,000? How about an extra $400,000 in the budget? That would be for next year. It's not a bad idea, but it doesn't do anything for us right now. I absolutely think it's a great idea. I mean, knowing the budget process and being able to read through it, I don't know how that really happens. What the effects are gonna be about that. So strategic-wise, I know that she runs, again, let me see the name, Narissa Wallen. She runs the Facebook group, and she puts all the information out there. I think that's another great idea to try and partner. I think we've already talked about forming a coalition to be able to kind of talk with Mars, talk with other communities to say, we need to band together, whether it's litigation or otherwise. Those are great strategic ideas, but what I think we created this meeting was for is to what to do on Tuesday. How are we going to interact in this joint town meeting to say FY20 is fast going to overcome us in terms of our ability to react. We're still somewhat kind of sharing the steering wheel with this one. And pretty soon we're gonna lose control of what the school's budget is going to be, and it is going to be handed to us. And we're all gonna have to make cuts, or one of us is gonna have to make cuts, and that's not good. Absolutely, go ahead.
I don't think that we're going to, I wouldn't call it a loss of, I'm sorry, I have to take this out.
Go ahead.
I don't think it's a loss of control.
Mm-hmm.
The townspeople, ultimately, it's up to the voters. And the voters have spoken 4 times.
Mm-hmm.
They said no to an override. They said no at the first meeting. They said no at the second meeting. They said no at the third meeting. How many no's do you have to have? They said yes to 19.5. They said yes to 19.5. They said yes to 19.5. So, again, I think, I mean, if there was something in this year's capital budget, within the budget that they have, if they had a capital item in this year's budget, which the superintendent wasn't able to identify anything, if they had that capital item and we could use that, because I did support you on that,
Yep.
then we could take that capital item and that would take it out of their OpEx, and we could sustain that, but the problem is that next year, we're going to have the same problem.
Right.
Because we have the same problem every year. So crisis, no. In a way, we have the same problem every year.
That's it.
So, and the other reason, so my thing is that we go back and we say, we make an amendment to $19,500,000. Because that's what the voters want. And that's what the voters seem to be most happy with. And so how many times are they gonna say no, until it turns into a yes? No, that's not what the voters are asking us for. They seemed happy with your amendment, that you stood up and you spoke.
Yep.
So at this point, and the reason that we didn't ask for an override is because the override no was resounding and overwhelming. So people have asked me, why don't you ask for a small override? Because the town is overrided out. They are overrided out, and they don't want any more. They don't. Most people have said to me, don't ask for an override. Please don't ask for an override. We don't want any more overrides. So we're not. This board is committed to not asking for an override. So how about, why don't you use free cash? Because we have a policy that says not to, and that is the quickest way for us to lose even it's not really quite mediocre, but it's not great, but it's not at the low end either. So that's the quickest way for us to even lose the bond rating that we have. So to use free cash for any kind of operating expenses, but ultimately that is up to the voters as well. The money is in your hands. So I say that we ask for an amendment for $19,500,000 and we put that back to a vote. That is what the voters have been asking for, and that is what they've been voting yes to. And I think that they're looking to us for leadership in that role again. That's what they're looking to us for. That's what the people are asking me for. Some people want the school's budget of $19,786,000. In my sphere of influence, some people are asking me why I won't support that. It's a we, and we can't afford that. We can't afford that.
And the voters don't.
And the voters are not asking me for that. And, the school committee is doing their job in its charge for the kids. But I read an extremely good email by Mr. May today. I don't know when it was sent, and I apologize. I've had so many other priorities about the school budget and how it's been presented. And the other thing is that Christine Lynch said that they set the budget because they thought it was lower than what was actually presented. So that says to me that maybe they're not gonna get the 1.2 million that we're sending them every single month. So I'm willing to take the risk of 19.5 million and to move forward with that. And let's say that this town solves its own problems like we've always done, and not have the state come in and solve the problems for us. And that's my take on that.
Carter, do you have something to add to that?
I just wanted, the second element of the use of free cash under our policy is for capital. There were a couple of items that the superintendent raised. They are on page 5 of your packet.
Oh, I thought the
Truly,
superintendent wasn't
they're
able
not,
to.
they're not really spot on. That's the chart that looks like this.
Tractor,
So
Chromebook lease,
They're
SRO.
buying a tractor and a truck and some other things, but they're leasing it. So to try to get that out of the operating budget for the next 5 years, you would have to come up with, between the two towns, however you could make that work, you'd have to come up with $66,000. And that would remove a 14,250 roughly item from the operating budget. They have in the operating budget $40,000 for the lease of Chromebooks. This is the very last year. He could not tell me with certainty that they wouldn't be doing something like that again next year. So, I mean, if this was textbooks, let's say, we talked about at one point that they weren't gonna replace. The other two items, yes, they pay us $38,500 for the SRO. We pay 84% of that. Please remember, if that's cut from the school budget to reduce the school budget, it is then cut as revenue on the town side. And finally, they have decided they want to plow their own lots and such this year, which is fine by us, but they're estimating that they're going to ask us to provide sanding and sweeping services. And so, again, I mean, that's really an operating budget. Those are the 4 items, and you can see that they don't really fit that, one-time capital payment that I think you were envisioning, Mike.
Well, I mean, how do you figure, if you pay for the tractor outright, other communities, when they use free cash, we do a lot of stuff by lease, because that's what we're able to do, but other communities might pay for an ambulance outright. If we, this is just discussion. You take the $60,000, and you're reducing their annual cost for that, but you're basically saying, I'm paying outright for your tractor. The Chromebook lease, it said, the note here, it says, FY '20 was the last payment. So that's $40,000 that does not reoccur in '21.
He couldn't state with certainty it wouldn't reoccur in 21.
All right, these are just, so swag figures,
Right.
the SRO, I understand that mix on that. But, and then the sand sweeping, so these numbers, all told is $157,000, but they all have their own story, okay? And the tractor is like, the tractor and the Chromebook lease seem like the ones that actually would make sense.
Yes, you'd have to use about a 84, again, figuring the mechanics this out would be required, but you would basically be spending something on the order of 105,000.
Yep,
You would
that's
you would
correct.
spend 84% of that, let's say, if you shared that with Phillipston. And then that would reduce the budget for the school district by roughly, for your assessment, 44. If you try to do something
You
with the
know,
SRO,
so,
then we'll just lose the revenues.
You know, in all of my experience with coming up with courses of action, you know, you have two, and then sometimes that third one is a blended. Diane, coming off of what you said just a moment ago, what if we came up with a blended approach where there were things? So if we actually, so 19.5, I think everybody in the room, hopefully everybody in the room, understands what that represents to the school in terms of what they have to pay. They know what the bill, if the bill comes due, we still have to do things on our end, but 19.5, I believe, as we, you know, hit the ball back and forth across the court during the meeting, that represents about $280-ish thousand.
No, it's actually over $300,000 in cuts to them, which is what they had produced. They couldn't come up with the 286, it came up to over 300,000.
304.
Well,
Three-
sure you can, you just change a revenue number.
Well, that's what they came
So
up with.
they were bracketing numbers.
Right.
I kinda liken
Sorry.
it to, like, when Carter came up with $400,000 worth of
Understand.
cuts. You, all right, you remember the original spreadsheet that we had? It was $400,000 worth of cuts, but all we were required to do back in January was 3-something. But it was within the realm of cuts. But I believe now, you know, it's all in, you know, the game of horseshoes, how close stuff is. If they voted on a 19.5, then that goes through their computations. So it's not like exact math. We're not gonna walk out of there going, yep, Templeton's assessment is 6.6, right. But if we came up with a blended approach that said 19.5, and then here are some concessions, we will take on some of your capital items that actually can make sense as capital items. Understanding that Phillipston, you know, would still incur cost with that tractor idea. I don't know how that muddies the water. Just trying to talk through things and, yeah. I feel it more within how you described it, Diane. With the voters' mandate, that's, you know, I guess, I'm the, you know, the optimist that's trying to find a compromise within this, so it's not, you know, thank you for saying it's, you know, we're the freshman class, the three of us, you know, I'm trying to make sure that we understand going forward that we want to be a part of their solution for trying to get their budget down.
But also beefing it up in the future by advocating for the schools in our state,
Well,
partnering with other districts and
right.
sending a firm message that we need help. But-
And some of that has been done by Senator Goby, getting up the
Right.
transportation to 80%. And then we did, at one of the meetings, send letters that Jeff, it was Jeff who had talked about that, if my recollection is correct. We sent letters to both Susanna Whips and to Representative Whips and to Senator Goby, and to Governor Baker. So, I mean, I do support that, Mike. I don't know how the remainder of the board feels about the capital expenditures, and I would like to hear from them on that, if they would not mind commenting.
I would also see it not,
It's not a lot of money, but it does add up. I'm a little concerned that we couldn't get an answer on the Chromebooks, because this is just for the middle school, high school. I do not know if the elementary school has Chromebooks, and if there is, I would imagine that there is a game plan in place to purchase them throughout the district. So my concern would be is that they are going to purchase them again, and yet we are trying to help them get out of this mess. And then here we go again with, oh, and now I'm going to purchase X. So I do have a concern about that. I mean, purchasing the tractor, okay. Chromebooks, I would imagine that they want them district-wide so that they can have some continuity throughout their education process.
And the process for this, being normal capital items, they actually could go to the, the capital planning committee just kicked off. So they could actually go, it wouldn't be a part, this blended approach, they could go to the capital, the capital planning committee.
I think that, since the meeting is next week, I think that we just have to go to the voters with 19.5. I think that, I would still like to hear from the rest of the select board about how they feel.
I'm waiting for Jeff. Gotta be patient with that guy.
I was kept back, so
Well, I think at this point, the voters are, it was a pretty decent margin that the 19.5 passed, and that's where it stood.
Mr. Jello.
if he wants to speak, go ahead.
I didn't know if you were gonna be open for.
I absolutely am. I mean, that's just my style for how
Okay,
this board
sorry.
runs. I don't want to try and stifle anything.
We already interrupted one meeting tonight inadvertently, but,
We all
Diane's
have
right,
comments,
Oh, okay.
We all have comments, so if you wanna do them all at once. or
Yeah.
Sporadically, or.
What I would ask, just so we can make sure we get it on the microphone, I hate to make people walk all around and everything, but if you can come up, yeah, absolutely. Jeff, you don't mind, or
Tom
you wanna go
Jelinek.
first and then?
No,
'Cause especially if there's gonna be quite a few of them.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
back more towards the beginning of the meeting, if I understood right, it sounds like the 19.5 figure is actually quite a bit higher than the minimum required contribution. Did I understand that correctly?
I absolutely think that you could. It's still it's actually not the lower end of a 19-point number.
Okay.
It's a compromise number where we would still have to address cuts. Yep.
So it sounds to me like offering 19.5 is the right thing to do. Diane said the voters voted 4 times for that figure. I think you need to stay the course and continue with that number. And it sounds to me like the school department bit off more than they can chew. They planned a budget with more money than they thought they were gonna get, or you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And I think staying the course, and I think we ought to go to the mat on that 19.5. And I said it in the meeting, I'll say it here. A situation like this will never get solved until it gets to a crisis position. That's the only way a problem like this will get resolved. It has to come to a crisis. We can't just keep kicking the can down the road. We have to stay with the 19.5. That's what the voters want. The voters elected you guys, you need to stick with it. And that's pretty much my opinion. And if you follow the social media, that is the opinion of almost anybody that contributes to that. I don't know the people that don't contribute to it, but that seems to be the prevailing opinion in the town right now, in my opinion, and the people that I talk to.
Thank you, Tom.
And I'm not against the school. I have a grandson in grammar school. My second career was teaching. I taught for 10 years, so I'm not coming at it from a totally anti-school position. I know what it's like to not have enough budget money at times, but, you know, they have to, the school committee has to understand they need to share the pain with the rest of the town. Using free cash is not a good idea. That's what got the town into the hole that they're in now.
Yep.
And we're finally digging out of it. It's a marathon, it's not a sprint. This board and the previous boards have worked really hard, and the accounting department has worked really hard to get us where we are today. We don't want to take steps backwards. So thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Regarding the 19.5, and I'm gonna stick with what I had talked about at a previous district meeting is, and I'm using DESI numbers from the Department of Education. when the final budget was signed off on, back in July 31st, and the governor signed it, DESI says that the Narragansett Regional School District will get total aid of $10,861,995. I take that number, and that includes school choice, in and out. They're scheduled to get like 1.4 for school choice in, and then you subtract the kids leaving.
those
And
numbers.
they're using those dollars in their original budget presentation to cover cost of teachers, health insurance, and there was a couple people on the school committee who are retired teachers and raised concerns about using school choice dollars, but to pay for some of those things. And they're using, so that's 10,861, and then they have $800,000, that's a combination of their E&D and their Medicaid funds, 300,000 from Medicaid and 500,000 from E&D. That comes up to their estimated receipts is $11,661,995. Their latest sheet is showing estimated receipts of $11,215,330. My major point, though, is you take that $11,600,000, I'll just round it to 600,000, to the already voted amounts by the towns of Phillipston and Templeton. Templeton, 6,461,000. You can round it off at 6,400,000 or 6,500,000. And Phillipston's I think it's 6 million. That comes up to around 19,800,000. If they accepted the 19.5, using numbers from the Department of Education and their figures, the school district, school committee's numbers that they said that they're gonna use, it's gonna come out to 19.8. That's more than the 19.7 that they've put in front of us. They finally did adjust their revenue or their receipts numbers to match with the DESI numbers, but again, they're showing the transportation at 300, from fiscal 19, they're showing that they only got 365,000. The actuals are already out, and they're on the Department of Education's website for 17, 18, and 19. And it's more than that. And that's another thing that just bugs me. Don't put in front of me that you only got $365,000 in
That's for FY19.
transportation money from fiscal 19, when it's already been, you've already been told that you got more than that, actual. It's the same as the town. Your levy says you can collect, I'm just making these numbers up, 10 million. But you actually only collected 97% of that. So you didn't collect in this year this much money. You only collected B. And I don't know why I can go, or anyone can go online and find these actual numbers and plug these in. If you got 400,000 in actual transportation money last year, don't lowball me. Put it in front of me, so I can make a decision on numbers that match. Because I look at the Department of Education numbers, and I'm looking at the school committee's numbers, and they don't match. And that's one of the reasons that I'm adamant of just amending it, proposing an amendment to the district-wide meeting of 19,500,000. Not the fact that, the people have voted on that
Right,
multiple times.
right.
I personally just don't see a downside to it.
Right.
If we have to go to December and the state, has to set the school budget in the end, according to the email from DESI, they're gonna take comments from all sides. That would be Phillipston, Templeton, and
Yeah.
the school committee. And, again, I'm just using the school's own numbers, and I'm using the numbers from the Department of Education. This is how much you're gonna get in state aid. And it doesn't add up with what the school has put in front of us, not in totality.
Am I correct?
And that's my thing, just throw all the numbers here in front of us, the good numbers, don't, don't lowball it, don't highball it, if you want to round, then just say so. 6,491,000, if you want to go to 5 or to 4, okay, that's fine. But
Jeff, when do we, I definitely, I get I share your frustration. At what point do we get the right numbers? Is there a point within this process that
December.
the numbers are officially announced? Or they actually correct everything so that it's like, oh yeah, that's exactly what happened?
well, at the last district meeting,
Why are the numbers wrong? Why are we accepting this?
when I spoke about this and mentioned this numbers, at their last school committee meeting, when they handed out the sheets, these spreadsheets where they had, no change and then A, B, and C, they did, like I said, they adjusted the charter school reimbursement and the transportation money. They had adjusted a few of them. And I think they're making the argument that, well, this is general fund and the school choice is different. But they're the ones, school committee, you're the people who are putting it all together to support your spending plan. So if you're using school choice dollars to pay for things, include it in your receipts. I mean, Department of Education does.
Right.
It's on their website. You can, there's all telephone numbers and email addresses of people from DESI on the site. You can call them. I've done it. I've talked with them. They don't deny it. They don't say, well, it's this. No, those are the numbers. That's the amount of state aid, total state aid, net state aid that Narragansett School District is going to receive.
Even
It's-
Narissa Whalen said that she would look into data for the school choice numbers.
I think that, I agree with Jeff, that FY19 numbers should be correct, because we're already into FY20. And I think that because we're already into this process, I'm happy that they did change the numbers and that they did listen to Jeff. I mean, if we had already decided on a budget, that would be different. We would have to take, just like us, numbers that were not necessarily complete, but we're not at that point, and we're trying to get to that point. So, I mean, what Jeff is saying is that, he's trying to point out to the public that DESI numbers say X, and that's why he's supporting 19.5. I think that that's Jeff's point.
And I know, when you say, well, we think we're gonna get 400,000 versus saying exactly 443. I know that affects your E&D money and all of this, but at this point in time, we should not be seeing how much you can squirrel away for, next year. You should be dealing with this immediate problem in front of you, and just give people good, straight, honest numbers, the best that you have available, including if you're gonna compare what you got in 19,
Right, that's what he's
and
saying.
you actually got more than what you've stated here. This isn't back in February of 2019. This is in October.
Yeah.
And they already know what they actually got.
If we're arguing over these numbers, you talked about, total money in, even if 19.5 is voted, so 19.8. They spent a lot of their meeting, Diane, talking about the cuts that they would have to make. I just, the massive,
As we did.
true, but I'm trying to put this against, so if the numbers shake out to be 19.8, and I really don't understand how you would wind up getting to that point where there's reality here. At some point, does the school district say, oh, we have 19.8, and they've already acted on layoffs and otherwise? I mean, it's just the incredible mismanagement at that point where you wind up laying off, enacting the cuts that they've publicly made when their revenues actually support a full budget as they've laid it out. It's entirely frustrating from my point of view. I wish I can try and, like, the movie Perfect Mind or something, where you got all the numbers flying around and
Beautiful mind.
and understand, try and understand, well, how is this going to shake out? In the end, we have a budget to execute. We have police that we want to put on the
Right.
street. We want to be able to hire people,
Right.
not hire people.
19.5 is still gonna require cuts. The
It
public
does.
needs to
So
be
I think that's
aware
an
of that.
excellent
That's not a full
segue.
budget for us.
So what Carter's done on this agenda, he's given us a couple of numbers, and then I just want to go into some of the comments that are in waiting out there. Yes,
Could
Bob?
I say one thing before you get off of what we were talking about here? As far as the 19.5 number. And the only thing I wanted to make clear on that for myself and anybody listening, if they wanna know what I think, is that last year the school had $18,674,000 budget, which is about 800,000 or so less than they're asking for, or the less than they'd be getting with the 19.5 that we're talking about right here.
Yep.
And out of that, they ended up getting $500,000 worth of E&D money, which is excess and deficiency. So that to me says 18.1 was needed last year. So I don't think we can call anything a crisis with a $1.4 million increase over last year's needed spending.
Right.
Just my thinking. It just, and when you go to the numbers, I've been having this problem on infinitum and just pulling my hair out, my blood pressure's going up, and the numbers are still coming in different than the last time. I think one of the big problems that I found with dealing with the school and the budget is picking a date. We don't have, this is the number on this date. Enrollment numbers change throughout the year, so they just change them according to this day, this day, this day, this day, this day, and they float throughout all the documents. If you look through the budget numbers, there's at least 6 different enrollment numbers. The foundation numbers, like Jeff says, from DESI to the school, to their presented budget is completely different, and they make no sense between the two, or between the three. So I just say that myself, as an individual citizen in town, I think the 19.5 number is more than generous. Looking at what I've seen in the budget. And for a $22 million budget overall, because that's what it is, it's not 19.7, it's 22 and change, we only get to see a portion of it. I think it's presented poorly, and I think the townspeople need it presented more accurately, so that they're not as confused like everybody else trying to figure this stuff out, what's going on. We shouldn't be, we should have numbers. We should have a fixed number, we should have this many kids, this many this many this, and here you go. It shouldn't be, I shouldn't be able to go and look up something and say, well, this is $300,000 difference. And you not be able to explain it.
Well, one of the
Just my
higher
thoughts.
budget comments that I heard in reference to the override was, well, we didn't think it was a problem because it wasn't explained to us correctly. And that's where I think everyone's been paying attention since that point, and that's why I think that we did get a few comments where people said, can you just go for a smaller override, when it was, overwhelmingly. Thanks, Bob. Overwhelmingly defeated. Just a
Did
couple.
other people have comments
I-
about?
I do, but I wanted to, because we had talked about 19.5 and because Carter had put a lot of numbers in front of us, the handout that I'm reading from is available on the website as far as a packet. So he talked about the current certification calls for an assessment towards Templeton of $6.9 million. This is a required cut, a total cut to the town of $312,000. A proposed $19.5 million school district budget would require a cut to the town of only $71,322. Goes more to your generous comment there. It was whispered at the last joint town meeting, but never came to the surface. A $19.6 million proposed school district budget would require a town cut of approximately $155,000. That's just kind of some food for thought when we talk about the 19.5 number. Yes, Mr. Terenzini?
I do just want to be clear that those are net numbers. On top of that, you still have to make the cut to the overlay
Right.
that we spoke of. And
I have a feeling there's gonna be some discussion.
actually
on
have deeper cuts, because when you cut the insurance and benefit budget, you then cut revenues that come in from the enterprise funds. So I just want to be clear, these are the net numbers. The actual cut numbers
that. Right,
will be different
Mhm.
when they're finally presented.
I agree. Would like to go first? I think the board's kind of batted around a lot of different concepts and otherwise, so I think we'd like to hear a little bit of input as we move on.
Well, I wanted
Just
to,
a name for the,
oh, I'm sorry, I'm Kelly Pomprion, the town
Can you spell
accountant. That would be P-O-N.
good evening, how are you?
I'm good. I wanted to come and just express my concerns over us using any free cash toward this. And I understand, your thoughts on a capital project for the school, but I think that's putting a precedent that that's what we would do in years going forward. And that is not gonna help the situation. I've been here 5 years now, and every year it has gone up. It's not ever gonna go down. Like Carter said, yeah, they have new expenses this year with the school, but that's not gonna change next year. It's gonna go up more. And the town has made such great strides
Agreed.
over the last 5 years.
Agreed.
From where I arrived, that we had no idea any numbers we had to where we are today. I just think that it would be a huge step back for us to use any of the free cash toward that. And I think that if that did happen, we would have, the DOR would be here, blazing with that. I was in many meetings with the DOR when we were trying to get all of the audits. And that was a resounding, theme of everyone, that a lot of the reason we had gotten into the situations we were in was because of the misuse of free cash.
Right.
So I just wanted to come and express that to you, because you guys are new on the board, and so you weren't involved in a lot of those conversations. Just wanted to give you that information so that you would have that, okay?
May I ask Kelly a question?
Absolutely.
Why do we have 1.4 million?
A lot of it is because of the roll forwards. We have all of those years where we didn't have any certified free cash, and you start rolling that and clearing up all the deficits and all of that, and that's where we get to that point.
And had we not done 4 years of audits in a row, would we have 1.4 million?
Probably not. We wouldn't have any certifications because the DOR wouldn't do them.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. I keep using metaphors and otherwise. There's the thing where you have the devil and the angel on your shoulder telling you different things to use. And I really do, I understand not only the history, but the hesitance to do that. But being that compromised person that wants to try and say, I listened to a lot of what the school board said, and they said this was supposed to, we were supposed to receive help or something like, I think they had mentioned a couple of times. So that's where that, I don't know which one would be the devil or the angel. The correct use would be the angel, I suppose. But I definitely consider both sides of that, understanding the pitfalls of that, and having been on advisory and capital planning, to see the fruits of actually good management, financial management policies is sending us on, you know, a really good track forward. You know, as I sat there and briefed the last select board, Cheryl and I were on the capital planning. We went through a very good year and we were able to do a lot. So I certainly don't make the suggestion thinking, well, it doesn't matter, or, oh, it's low risk or something. It's extremely high risk. And I'm certainly listening to everything tonight, and I feel that the angel is winning. Any other comments? No? Luann?
I'm just gonna, well, Luann Royer, Deputy Assessor. I'm just gonna reiterate what Kelly said, the free cash. I mean, you guys talk about your management letter, and I'm sure you've all seen the DOR management review. And it actually shows you the figures in that review of exactly how much of the free cash we ate up going from early 2000s up until 2012.
Okay.
When we literally crashed our budgets, cut the town down to nothing. And we took cuts, and we had nobody in any of these buildings working because we had chewed up all our free cash and we had no money left to fund the town's budget. So, you know, when the option came out to use the free cash to give to the school, it's not a good idea. If you listen to the Department of Revenue, it's not a renewable revenue source.
Right.
The reason why we have so much right now is, like Kelly said, it was from the snowballing of every other year. You know, and we are getting into a situation where we are bringing more free cash into the town, but it's also time to give that back to the town in their budgets, in their capital plannings, and getting equipments and getting things done for the town. And honestly, like Carter said, the school, there isn't anything unique to this budget that's funking it out and making it go way above its budget limit this year, and it'll be fine next year, because they're gonna come back with that same figure. And actually, they've told us that they're coming for an override too. So I don't think this is gonna be a solution, and I think we need to, like Diane said, stick with what town meeting floor has told you. No, no, no. And maybe down the line, you might wanna think of putting forward a statute that lets you bring a question to town meeting floor once a year, and then that's it. Because people are getting sick and tired of coming to town meeting floor and hearing a no vote going into a fifth time.
It is terrible. And it costs money to the budget.
It does. It's
Their
cost us over
budget, not us.
10,000 so far. for
Costs
these
us?
Meetings, yes.
Thank you, Luann.
10,000 to us,
Yeah, there's a lot of,
to the staff.
a lot
Thank
of
you.
good points coming to, and a lot of good points for questions that people had on that, how they interacted to each other. But I wrote that down for the, you said question to town meeting floor once, and then how, can you describe it?
We had talked, even Carter and I, about a statute, and there's statutes out there that you can
No means no.
bring an article once a year, and that's it.
Um,
Something you could look into.
For a town meeting, not the joint meeting? Is
Yeah,
is
town
that-
meeting budget, like when you go in once a year, you ask something on town meeting floor.
Okay.
I don't know how it would affect district-wide.
I thought
but
you meant
still.
like the back and forth game that we're playing right now.
Well, the
with-
district-wide
the
is
district-
a
the district-
statute as well.
It is,
Yes.
and
It's a
that's why I was gonna
process.
say, you know, it's, still, it's very nebulous that, that statute for district meetings, but I understand where you're coming from now. Is anything else?
My only comment would be to these two ladies that spoke. They deal with the public every day,
Mhm.
and I'm sure you're getting the same input that you just verbalized here tonight, so that's something to take into account.
Thank you, Tom.
Any other discussion? Carter, is there anything else in our packet that we think that we should consider before anyone on the board makes a motion? Yes, Carter.
If I can turn your attention to the fourth page of the packet, please. So this revised budget is lower modestly, which is good, but it was done by changing to actuals that came out of the budget, which means now instead of that flowing to free cash, E&D, in the spring, that will not be available, and so their ability to sustain the 500,000 E&D could be at some greater risk. I just need you to understand that going forward. In this, I've given you kind of the history of the assessments. If the 19.786 passes, that results in 6,923,909 to us, which is a 9.33% increase. And the additional contribution we're making, it would be 33.73% above the statutory requirement. At 19.5, you'd have a 5.53% increase, and you'd be making 28.51%. You could, if you're looking to have the bad angel and the good angel somehow each be moderately bad, you could have a split approach here. You could have a number that you're gonna propose as an amendment. 19.5 is a number that has been passed by the meeting, the district meeting twice now.
3 times.
I'm hopeful that the schools will have listened over the last couple of weeks and perhaps be pondering between now and Tuesday some lower number. And so as a, for instance, if they came in at 19.6, perhaps the board steps back and lets the meeting vote upon that. I leave that to you. Those are political judgment calls. I will tell you administratively, the two boards have to get to a budget. We haven't even turned to page 2, which is the fall town meeting. And I've got an assessor that needs to get her work done. I just can't stress to the two bodies that this game of chicken is not in the interest of the community.
Thank you.
No disrespect. I think this board, let's remember what this board promised. If you, the school district, will take a 0% increase, we will support the override for whatever you need. And the board did that.
Yes.
It did not speak against the override. It put the override on the ballot. It was very supportive of the school district.
Commentary on that.
In terms of saying this is the budget they need. The board did not actively oppose it in any way. So I think that the board committed on what it said it would do.
So I would like to make a motion that on town meeting floor, that this board makes an amendment to 19,500,000.
Second.
On a motion that has been made and seconded to make an amendment on the floor of the joint town, district town meeting for 19.5, is there any further discussion? Any further discussion?
In favor of the 19.5, there was an article in the Athol Daily News that Phillipston Elementary's gonna need a new roof and more work next year, so they might not even be able to afford their school, so
Yeah.
we need to stick with the 19.5.
Any further discussion? Thanks for the gas on the fire.
Hey, you know,
Of those
sometimes,
metaphors.
I look at it this way. We're struggling this year, but if we put the town and the town's needs first, and we get our act together, I was gonna say something else.
We have our act together.
Well, keep our act together
Thank
and move forward, then there's gonna be times that once we're in the clear and we're in better shape, we will be able to do what our bylaw says, support what the state funds, and then maybe go a little over, but right now we can't.
We're already over.
Yeah, we are, the 19.5 again, the
We'll be
19.5
over by
is over,
20
so
We'll
this,
be at 28.51%.
so there you go, the people spoke, we are still being generous.
Any further discussion on the motion to offer an amendment on the district-wide meeting on the 22nd to 19.5 even? How do you vote, Jeff?
Yes.
Terry?
Yes,
Diane?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well.
Thank you, Mike, for your suggestions.
Yep, we got,
It's gotta be
gotta,
rough, cause
gotta have options.
it's gotta be rough.
That was at 7:52.
I make a motion to adjourn.
I don't think we're adjourning. We have-
Second that.
No.
What happened?
We have, Mr. Terenzini, we got the second part of this, discussion for fall town meeting.
Well, I just wanted to, I sent out an email, Mr. Chairman, to the advisory committee, to this body, saying, you know, what you had started the meeting with, which is the board had promised
Yep.
a consultation process in getting to a budget. And our last night to get that done before December 1 is November 26th. So it's a tight schedule, particularly given I really can't start it till I know the gap that we have to close. But the idea is that we would put a set of proposals into your packet on Thursday, the 7th, which would be made available to the public and sent out to the advisory committee that night as well. It would be formally on your agenda the 13th for a referral to a public informational session on Thursday, the 21st. Invite the advisory committee, they'd have to act that night, or at least you'd be consulting with them, and then a final select board vote on the 26th.
Okay.
That's, at this point, it's kind of the only schedule that I could come up with that seemed to allow enough daylight on the discussion and get us to December 1. And I just want to, I had no pushback on that from anybody, so that's what I'm going forward with unless we, A, don't get a budget or somebody has a concern here tonight.
Nope. I'm good.
Okay. So, in setting the budget for FY '21, there's a slight detour here. The financial management policies say that we'll use 100% of collected taxes. If I can get you to turn, please, to, I believe it's page 6 in this packet. Apologies, it's page 7. This is one of the items that Jeff and I met on the other day. Jeff would like to see the Section A3 revenue and expenditure forecast amended. And if that's the board's wish, this board's wish, it has been discussed once previously before with another board. I need to know that before we prepare those revenue projections that are coming to you at your first meeting in November, I believe. I forget now exactly. So I would leave this to Jeff to discuss his thoughts, and then the board could tell me their direction.
Okay.
Again, this just carries on to what I mentioned, talking about the school, is whatever the tax levy is, and I'm just making up a number, but it's just, if it's 10 million, and Templeton is not the only community that does this. Not every community does it, but most do, because it's allowed by the Department of Revenue. Whatever your levy limit is, you can say, we have that to spend. Even if your records show that you know you're not going to collect that in this fiscal year. You generally collect it, you might collect it 2 years, 3 years. If you look through the expenditure reports and the budget versus actuals, revenue sheets, you'll see sometime if you go to land court, you spend about $1,000, and somebody owes you like $3,000 in taxes from, 3-4 years ago. So my premise is to actually budget, or say we have this to spend. We know we're not gonna collect the 10 million this year. Why do I plan on spending 10 million? And it's not easy, and I'm not saying it is easy. And I'm not saying that it has to happen, you know, this cycle. But again, it's another thing that I think the town should seriously look at. Because if we are only actually collecting, say, 9,500,000 out of a possible 10 million in a fiscal year, I think that's what you should plan on spending, having available to spend. And my thoughts on this, and there are some communities in the state that actually do this. By using less than your levy limit, instead of taxing every penny that you possibly can, and again, I didn't say it would be easy, but I think in the long run, it pays off. If by chance your revenue collection goes up to 98%, but you're only spending on the 97%, you're gonna do two things. You're gonna have, that's free cash coming in, or it's not really free money, it's not free cash. It's a bad word in my opinion, but it's unassigned fund balance. It hasn't been appropriated for anything. And the other thing it will do is you build up excess levy capacity for each year. And I think it's the town of Amesbury that they have like $4 million over a period of years. So when you have something like this with the school comes up, or anything on the town side, you have that money sitting there that you can now raise by your tax rate. Because say if you get to a capacity of, say, $1 million. Again, you could tax at 11 million, but you've been staying on this 10 million, or 9.5, and you build up excess levy capacity.
So what
You have money, you know, in theory, like on the shelf, where you can grab to cover. So these things don't become a critical emergency where you gotta start cutting this and doing this and that. But as far as spending what we actually collect, plan on spending what we actually collect. And I believe you can do it without big interruptions, because as I look at the budget narrative put out by the town administrator, and I went back, since he's been here, this has been his narrative. For 18, for 19, and for 20. The fiscal 2020 budget is often referred to as a zero-based budget. I built the budget from a clean sheet of paper based upon service priorities and a careful eye on resources needed to provide the services. So if you're starting from zero, right, and your levy limit is, say, 10 mil, but you know your records for the past 3-4 years, you've only collected 97% of that consistently. Then start your spending plan with that 97%.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I understand.
And I'm saying, I'm not saying it's easy.
Okay.
I'm just saying that,
In layman's terms, it's akin to living below your means.
well, actually within your means, but
Within, but even below, if you could live below, I mean,
Yeah,
isn't that
in
the
that
ideal, to
emergency
live below
part.
your means, so you can have extra money?
and again, I didn't say it was easy, but it's just,
Diane?
Previous boards have discussed this with the advisory committee and have voted against it. The reason being is that our treasurer collector does a good job collecting, and that we've done a much better job than we used to in collecting past tax bills. And we were adamant about not doing it this way. And to cut $300,000 out of our budget, just assuming it was, just hypothetically speaking, Joe Public and Mary Public, where would we get that from? Because we do get it in subsequent years. And most towns do it this way. I would like to ask Carter how many towns live on collecting 97%, 96%, 98%, 95%, 99%. No town is perfect in collecting their taxes. I would find that extremely hard to believe, because you have foreclosures and you have just people who don't pay their taxes, either land taxes or residential taxes, and whatever the case may be. But we were adamant about not doing it this way, and that we were going to live, and his zero-based budget is based on a zero-based budget, not what we collect. So where would we take those cuts from? And it's not that it is hard to do. It is very hard to do. And could we do it in this current year? No. Could we do it in a subsequent year? No. Could we do it over time? Maybe.
Well, we had our retreat and setting goals or otherwise.
And this never came up.
Yeah.
Because
Jeff, I got a question for you. So, you set it at 97%, and you say you're having a rough year. What changes that? Do you collect more? Do you basically have the?
No, your levy capacity is, your levy ceiling is, the max amount of money that you can raise from real estate taxes.
Got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it's a certain
And
percentage.
whatever that is, whatever that number is, it's 10 million, it's 15 million, it's 11 million, whatever. Whatever that number is.
I've done the numbers. I know.
It's based on a certain percentage of how
And
much you can
you
collect.
only, it's, every town is different. It's for your valuations and all of that.
Yep.
But whatever your levy is, the most amount of money that you can possibly raise from property taxes,
Right.
instead of saying we're gonna spend all of that, you leave some there. You don't spend it. You don't put it on paper. And it's called excess levy capacity. So, in theory, everybody thinks, well, you can only raise your taxes 2.5%. If you have excess levy capacity, you can go up 5%. You could go up 8%, whatever that leftover money that you have not touched, whatever that is. You go along and you spend this, and then if something happens, like this school, instead of cutting the budget, instead of going through all of these meetings, you can say, you know what? We can raise this funds because we have excess levy capacity.
Is that the delta between 100% and the set rate of 97?
Well, that's our collection rate, as far as I can see from the records that would,
97.
is about our collection rate, 97.
But that's of your current year taxes. But you have to take into account all of the additional funds that you've now collected from all of the prior years, which pretty much can make up almost all of that 3%. Because you're always gonna have an amount of money that you collect from the prior years, and there's the roll forward. So when you add it all together of those taxes, it pretty much is your 100%.
But my point is, if you do it that way, live below the 100%, and you build up the levy capacity, you don't have to tax to the max year in and year out, and you have a built-in emergency reserve, so to speak, that you can tap into for when things like this happen. If y'all remember 2014, where basically you skeleton crew in the town for 7 weeks. It's 510,000, something like that. If you have excess levy capacity to tap into, that's not an emergency. That's not a crisis. And I know it's not, this isn't gonna get, I know it wasn't gonna get received well, and it's not gonna get done, tonight or this fiscal year. I just wanted to bring this forward as things to think about moving forward.
Okay.
Again, it doesn't solve the school issue. It doesn't solve the cuts. It doesn't solve money always being tight right now. But, and I am gathering the cities and towns that have excess capacity and how they
Yeah,
have
that's,
done it.
that's what I thought. Kelly, did you have something to add? Diane? can you
It's,
wait just a
again,
second?
it's, and I
Did
know
you have
it's
something to
new and it throws a wrinkle in people's thought process and stuff, but it's municipal government and
think
spending.
that I mean, I welcome the conversation
Me
about
too.
it. Kelly, did you have something to add in?
I think it's it's a great, in theory, idea, but by doing that, we already are having to make cuts to staff.
Yeah, I
to
understand.
all of this stuff, and by doing that, to leave the levy capacity there, to do that, you're gonna have to make more cuts. And so it's like, okay, do you make the cuts now, and we budgeted the 97%, which is a fabulous idea, and you make those cuts now, so that you have a rainy day fund, basically what that is, to solve these issues.
Yeah.
So it's, do you make the hard cuts in the beginning and say, okay, we're gonna cut all this out to have this rainy day fund? I mean, that's in essence, in a nutshell, what it's doing. And, so that's what you have to come up with the idea. Are you gonna make all these drastic cuts right now so that you can have this cash, instead of budgeting or using it in the taxes, you then are gonna put it aside over here to take care of this school issue or to take care of another issue? So in theory, it's a fabulous idea, but Templeton doesn't have, we just don't have resources to do that, in my opinion. Again, this is all my opinion and my thoughts, but I agree with Jeff, that would be a fabulous idea. But I think that when you look at the ripple effect of that, that's an issue. But again, that's my opinion.
Diane?
2014 is never going to happen again because it was a mathematical clerical error on a recap sheet, and no one caught it. So the $500,000 is, we have the best staff now, and we do checks and rechecks, and that's why the DOR is still on top of us, so that doesn't happen again. So I don't see that happening again, because we now have a team, we have a financial team, and the cuts that we would have to make, again, in theory, it's a good idea, but the cuts we would have to make, we promised our community that we would not make cuts to the financial team. So is public safety gonna be affected yet again? We can't afford to take any more public safety cuts. We just can't afford it. We can't even afford what we're taking for cuts right now. And we just got a new email today about hours and staff, and because we're taking a proactive approach. Thank God for our department heads.
Hi. So what I'm hearing is great idea,
Right.
timing.
Yeah, I'd like
You
to.
know, and I'm hopeful for the future for Templeton. We are moving up, we are doing the right thing, we're taking the baby steps or whatever the steps we need, we're
Yeah, I
in a
was
good
thinking
place. I don't
baby
think we're gonna
steps.
go backward unless we have a huge mistake or debacle or glitch, but I think Jeff hit the nail on the head. I love the idea, and I'm hopeful going forward that once we start raising revenue and our bond rating goes up and things turn around for us, freshmen,
I hope
that
someday I win the lottery.
we can implement that excess levy capacity. I'm looking forward to reading about it, and I would like to do that someday.
Any final words before I table it?
Yep.
Okay. Tabled, please.
Nice job.
Given the hour, I'm gonna take item D and just remind you all that we're finishing up the minutes of the joint meeting, because we talked about, amending the district agreement, a coalition, recall, and some
Yep.
others. But I need to ask for your forbearance in moving onto the fall town meeting
Okay.
warrant, if I might. So my apologies, I had a typo error in the top. We really need to have a fall town meeting warrant by November 1 if we're going to have a fall town meeting on November 20. That's about 19 days. That's about as close as I can cut it to get it advertised, constable posted.
Yep.
14 days, all that good stuff. My target to get it done is 10/23.
That's a week from today.
It is a week today, which is why here comes apology number 2. I don't have a good draft for you, because I have spent most of my time on school and
Yeah.
other matters.
Yeah.
But I can run you through what a number of the articles are, and I need some direction on some of them.
Okay.
We'll have some late bills.
Yep.
Can't seem to break that cycle. We have the $37.10 from what I call the Uber fund that you get. We have to appropriate that before December 30. We have a report we have to file. I'm gonna ask for it to go into the Mart promotional campaign again. And I'm going to include it in the consent agenda at the annual town meeting, to see if the town will vote to appropriate any funds received under, I'll probably have to get the technical name, I probably can't put the Uber fund into
right.
the article.
I remember what I just don't remember what it was, yeah.
Yeah, it comes from that ride sharing, that
Yep.
10 cents. So I think if we put it into the consent agenda every spring, I've done that in other communities with similar kinds of things. We got all of the several hundred pages back in the codification process from the Attorney General, and they found 3 flaws. You may remember that we adopted Mass General Law, Chapter 21D across the board, which is the non-criminal
Yep.
civil disposition. 21D requires that the fines be a fixed number. So for instance, on the wells, not complying with that bylaw, there was a fine of not less than $100 nor more than $300. Board of Health says $100 is just fine,
Check.
no pun intended with them. On the open container, the alcohol for, in cannabis, and Bob has nothing to comment on this about tonight. Thank you, Bob. It's the same issue. It was not less than 100, not more than 300. The chief wants 300. My question to you before I plug that in is, are you agreeable to that?
This is going to town meeting.
Has to go
I
to
support,
town meeting,
I
yep.
support chief going into town meeting.
Me too.
Do we have to make a motion or?
No, you get
I
consensus.
just need a consensus so I can draft
Okay.
the articles.
It's going into town meeting, so people can have a whack at it. But I support the chief.
Okay?
1, 2, yes. You got at least a consensus over here,
Okay.
or majority, I
I'm gonna
should say.
reflect that there was a consensus on that.
Okay.
Jeff, you're good? 300?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. We have the cannabis overlay district. We have overlay A, overlay B. One is up in the Baldwinville school area and that land around it. One is on all commercial highway, and I can't remember which is A and which is B.
Okay.
But that's prepared to go forward. I'd like to come back to the free cash uses in a moment.
Okay.
Sewer department wants to use some retained earnings to buy a new truck. Budget, you may recall there's one member of the advisory committee that believes it's not clear as to who presents the budget. This debate has gone on for
Yep.
too long. We did get an opinion of town council. Jeff would like to take a more proactive step in order to quiet the issue. And we discussed on Tuesday here, adding some language to the bylaw that says, where it says the town administrator prepares the budget, and then at the end of that section, we would say, and further, to present and defend the same to the town meeting for action. That's,
And it
we'll,
would-
we'll work that through with town
I
council.
support that.
It would just align with chapter 39, section 16, because that's the last sentence. Unless you have a bylaw that says this,
Thank you.
then it's the finance committee.
you
So I
all.
just think
Thank
putting
you
those
all.
words in there follows the mass general law and just,
Jeff, I support
it
you.
just ends that.
Thank you, Jeff.
So, I don't have any problem with it. We'll work it through with council.
Okay.
But I wanted to make the board aware of it in case there were any questions or concerns. Ambulance receipts reserved for appropriation. If I can turn your attention, please, to the second to the last page of the packet. I would, this is an item that came up from Jeff. We discussed it the other day, pluses and minuses, and I would defer to Jeff to speak on it if that's agreeable.
What are you looking for, Jeff?
His voice is better tonight.
Yep.
Again, this is one of those things that I believe, it was the town had an ambulance receipts fund at one time. For whatever reason, it was dissolved, and that money was just rolling into the general fund. And whenever there was a need for an ambulance or anything, it would go to town meeting, either for a debt exclusion or an override. It would always, a lot of times it would fail. So in 2011, when this thing started about, the ambulance service and this is talk about going, full-time and this and that, expanding it, which I was not in favor of, but my thought was, if you're going to do that, then have an ambulance receipts fund where when the ambulance works and you collect from the insurance companies and so forth, this money goes into this fund and it would support the ambulance service primarily, and to some extension, the fire department. If you recall, just a couple of years ago, a lot of their breathing bottles apparatus needed to be replaced.
Yep.
At great cost and so forth, and it's like, where are we getting that money from? And, because they,
Yeah.
I don't know, 50 of them, there
Yeah,
was
it was on capital last
all
year.
at
It
the
was a
same
lot.
thing. So, the article had the ambulance receipts funds going into this fund to be expended only through town meeting vote to fund various fire department capital requests pursuant to the betterment of the fire department. And again, sometimes it happens, and I think the people were being trusting, that their intent would, by way of the article, would be carried out. And it says, on a motion duly made and seconded, the town voted to create a fire ambulance receipts reserved for appropriation account where collected ambulance receipts for services are placed. And what has happened is, we're almost repeating what was done before. That money is ending up in the general fund. The last few years, there's an article in town meeting to appropriate $250,000 to the general fund. And yet we have.
From this account that was
From the
created.
ambulance receipts fund has been transferred into the general fund. And the amount has been $250,000. My thought was, I would like to see where the rest of the board stands regarding a special town meeting. If we amend the town meeting vote to align a motion with the article where this ambulance receipts money would go for capital items, prioritize, I would suggest or believe that it would be ambulance first and then fire department. So like, right now we have, 92,000 or so for lease payment for a fire truck. We have 56,000 for an ambulance lease. If we don't have the money to outright purchase the ambulance, which I believe there's enough money in there, and then that would be the call, whether you want to drain it down that low to just outright buy as you spoke about earlier, about buying things outright instead of
Right.
leasing them.
Right.
But if we do the lease, the fire truck and the ambulance, which both articles said raise and appropriate, which means that can come from tax revenue.
Mhm.
Those two items could come out of the ambulance receipts fund and have a funding source, because we know right now, we
Yeah.
just got a budget versus actual.
I follow you, Jeff, what I'm missing here is, what is the actual action? I mean, I'm hearing you, and I think I'm falling in line, but I just don't understand. You're amending what was done in 2011, or you're having a new
Amend the town
article?
meeting vote to specify, because what was voted
Hang on a second, I see your
allows,
hand.
a lot of latitude for those funds. If you amend the motion to more align with the article, to specify that the ambulance receipts will be used for capital items of the ambulance fire department. So the monies raised by the ambulance service will more closely, more directly go to support that service.
Yeah, you're
along-
making the ambulance receipts a fenced account for ambulance and fire.
Capital
Yeah,
things.
I follow you on that.
I know the intent-
If you can describe the language of how that would happen, I see that bottom line there, lost to the general fund, but I also understand some of the other impacts that you just explained. I could get behind this, Jeff. I think Diane,
And again,
has-
it's not easy, but
I know that.
if you
But I
either kick the
remember a
can
lot
down
of
the road, go
discussion.
down,
Yeah,
down.
People at town meeting have been talking about this one.
Let's talk, yeah.
If you free up, and that frees up other funds to do other things with, especially looking, I'm trying to look ahead for the benefit of the entire town. I got no skin in the game. I got no relatives that work for the town. I don't work for the town.
Yep.
I don't want any money from the town at all. And last year, I recall, in your very detailed, good capital plan outline, there were a lot of things that were left on the table because you run out of money.
That's right.
I believe this approach you have a direct funding source that's just gonna keep, because unfortunately, fire calls in a lot of communities, they go down, but the ambulance stuff is going up. And I know this.
They consume a lot of, they have things that expire, they have
And they're
equipment,
high-dollar things, they're
their
not
OSHA
cheap.
stuff,
If we could
you
keep
got
it,
me.
like you said, corralled in to support that department. And
Yep.
then no tax dollars have to go there, which allows tax dollars for services, other services. And it takes a little pressure off free cash to be used, maybe speed up capital items or maybe speed up savings. Because the amount of money that we have in stabilization fund, really, for the budget that we have, is chump change. It's not, by any standard, it's,
Yep.
I mean,
I know.
when you started at 90 grand a few years ago, yes, 400,000 is,
Yeah.
it's a big jump. But if you look at our budget and our financial responsibilities, that's a drop in the bucket. It's
Yeah.
not something big. And again, you have to think that way these days.
Diane?
I remember when this was created, it was supposed to be used for, like, trucks, ambulance, not for SBCA bottles and not for that kind of stuff. They were supposed to be coming to the community for that. So if we're changing it, then the language has to be changed. Humor me, please, and tell me exactly, because I had looked into this when Chief Laporte was here, and the language kept getting, like how we did warrant articles, kept getting changed every year. I couldn't even keep up with it, because I wanted to fix it back to this. But it was supposed to be for big ticket items, not for, I believe they should have been coming to you for SBCA bottles, not to this account. That's how I see that. But that's my own personal opinion.
Right.
So can you humor
So-
me and
so,
tell me why we would lose 120
Sure.
lost to the general fund? Please.
Couple of things, if I might first, is with no history, one never knows why a warrant article, when it was worded, got changed by the meeting, what the debate was, what the reasons were on the floor. And I will just say that for starters, I would be very much opposed to the capital request as deemed by the Templeton Fire Chief. You know, that's back to the silo days. You know, capital planning, that should be settled
Right, it's
through this
capital
body in the
planning.
capital planning. So the way this works is the plus, that this creates a fenced source of money
Yeah.
for fire and EMS. So.
That's the language that I like.
Pay the ambulance lease and the pumper lease out of that. And now so you've removed that money from the budget, 150, 146, and you pay that out of the ambulance proceeds. You then have to cut the town's operating budget by approximately $110,000. Because right now you appropriate 270. So you're appropriating 270 and you're paying 150 in here, 160. When you appropriate 160 and you pay 160, that 110 stays in the fenced account. It's not available to the general fund. So you have to figure out how to cut the general fund by that $110,000.
Bottom line.
The next thing that happens is it does free up more free cash, which is a good
Yep.
thing, because when you need that next thing, right now, if you can keep the ambulances on a 5-year rotation with that 56, 57, 8, that just self-funds. That's perpetual going forward. And if you could figure out what you need for your major apparatus on that 92,000, 95,000, 100,000 a year, those can go forward. Strategically, the items that generally tend to get the most support for capital exclusions and debt exclusions tend to be for the fire department. And so you lose that option for funding these things as well. So there is merit to it. There are minuses to it. We can go either way you want. But if you want to do this for fiscal '21, we would want to do this on the fall town meeting, so we take this into account in preparing our budget projections. If you want to ponder it more, we would do it in the annual town meeting, and then you'd have it to take it into account for your fiscal '22.
Okay, my intent was not to, I pushed this up to Carter because I think it's important, and I just didn't want it, sitting here. But the fall town meeting is probably a rush for it.
Yeah.
And there's not enough time to present it to the people. But it's something I don't want, as you spoke the last time we met. These things come up, you write them down, you don't want to forget about them, you don't want to let it go out there. I happen to think, I wouldn't bring it up, I just happen to think it's important enough
I agree.
to be considered. And I would ask a question, the ambulance, in 5 years, 56,000, I don't believe is gonna cover a payment for an ambulance, because they're gonna go up. They're not, I can just go back and look, And with regards to the 270, the fire chief asked for an extra 20,000 to what? To cover part-timers, to try to keep that ALS service
To offset the
going.
cuts he was gonna have to take,
have to
yes.
take. So, I mean, that's another can you're kicking down the road that's gotta be dealt with out of the regular budget, because, again, we're going back to this piecemeal thing to keep everything floating. And that's gonna be one of those hard decisions that's coming down the pike, and
I will say in support of Jeffrey on this, and you can ignore I said that for a moment. The intent
I'll let
had
the air
been-
out of my head.
The intent had been to try to hold that 250 in the ambulance constant, 250 in the ambulance constant, for a substantial period of time so that we could build that reserve up so that when you needed that new ambulance, you had more cash
Right.
on hand. Strategically, the move to the 270 poses some challenges, but we will now need to keep it at the 270 for that number of years and maybe even start to dial it back if
Yeah.
we can. So I could put this in a folder, and after we get through, the annual town meeting,
Fall town meeting?
we go into budget after the fall
Yeah.
town meeting.
I think it should be at the annual town meeting, so we have time to talk about it in front of the public as well.
We could make it part of the legislative package.
We had, again, we had our retreat and we talked about our goals and everything, and, I think the stuff that, Jeff brings forward, I think that they're all good ideas that you're bringing forward, and I know where your heart is on a lot of them. I think if we space them out and actually put them in, within a planned implementation, I think that actually might be able to get there. I don't,
Patience is not my virtue, son.
well, some of them, I believe it was Mick Jagger who said, you can't all get what you want, so.
And that is the challenge for us, because we
Yeah.
have this annual town meeting, fall town meeting, budget planning.
I think we're
We
we're
need
very
running room
favorable.
when you're
See,
gonna
as
change
Carter
these
gives,
policies.
as Carter gives Adam more stuff to do, I'm trying to keep Carter busy.
Oh, there you
Is
go.
that what it is?
Yeah, Carter
We're
didn't
just
find those
pawns.
reduced hours this week yet.
So
Mr.
Carter,
Bennett.
he's basically saying we're just pawns to get
But
you.
the most
whatever.
important one, to me, the most important thing that I think belongs on the fall was the wording of, the budget stuff, because I just like to follow the words of chapter 39 and get that, so there's no more gray area, there's no more, that's it. It's right here in black and white, in the bylaw. When it comes to the budget, A, B, C is
Okay,
done
yeah,
there.
I thought you were
Done.
still in the ambulance thing, and I couldn't figure it out. Yes, 100%, yeah, you got consensus with that.
I just, if it's in black and white, there's no more, well, it looks good. Yeah, it does look good to me. But I just like to see the words. And that way there's no more smoke to be raised with that issue. Put
Got it.
that in the drawer and.
Moving along.
So the next item is the advisory committee. We had, a previous board had put forth some changes to the bylaw. Those got tabled. We all watched whatever happened or didn't happen. The advisory committee eventually did a proposal of its own. I brought that to the select board, asked for direction, and I did not get any direction at the time. I want to try to bring this to some resolution. There's some wording, there's some administrative challenge. Jeff and I looked at it the other day. It's not clear. I think that issue is just a wordsmithing issue. And then there's an administrative challenge. And what I'd like is direction from the board, either, nope, we're not gonna deal with it, or nope, just put what the advisory committee wants in front of the town meeting. Or, yeah, Carter, go back to the advisory committee and tell them you're gonna support placing something on the annual town meeting warrant. I don't have time to do this the fall.
Annual.
And you have some freedom to talk about the wordsmithing issues that you see them, and the administrative challenge that you see.
I support, Diane just said it, annual, I'd like to say annual, but I also I'm supportive of, how they'd like to see, all the different things. I was part of that process of how it was non-starters, we just didn't seem to get anywhere. I'm 100% supporting getting this done, there was a lot of back and forth. This is what we'd like, or otherwise, I'd like it to be done. I think that we can get someplace. I viewed that whole thing as we're making much ado about nothing. Yes, it means something, but it really, it's about getting people on the board. I don't need to confound that. I don't think we need to confound that process. or put it in the right hands. I don't think there's any kind of sneaky ill intent or otherwise. I support what the advisory committee would like to come back with to get somebody on the board. We should not be constrictive. We should not be trying to stop a process or otherwise.
The challenge is in one section, it
There were
says
some issues.
that the moderator will appoint people for 3-year terms.
Yeah.
Then down below, it says if there's a vacancy,
Yep.
the advisory committee will fill it.
Yeah.
And then it talks about, but then the moderator will fill it with the balance.
Yeah.
And they're completely
It was a
separate.
mess.
Unless you know how that thing was written, and fortunately Jeff did yesterday, you wouldn't even connect those dots.
Right.
We think that they just need to be reorganized
That's
a little
fine.
bit and cleaned up there.
Let's do it.
The second piece has to do with, is it the 8th or is it the 35th day? The original intent was to have the select board give the documents. The original intent of the prior board's proposal
Mm-hmm.
was to have the select board send the documents, everything to the advisory committee, 30 days before the town meeting. One of the reasons in changing to a floating date was because there was a hope at some point of moving the town meeting into June.
Right.
And so, rather than having, you have to turn everything over 60 days basically in advance, the idea was to make it a rolling thing. The other problem is that remember, we got the budget early from the school. Legally, they don't have to give it to you until March 30. And the reason the April 10th date was originally chosen was so that at least the select board had 10 days to figure out how to react to that. So the rest of it, we've looked at it. Is it what we like? No. Does it pose any problems? No. But that timing, we think, has some challenges for the future. And so we'd like to reach out and see if we can resolve. One's a wordsmithing, having the lawyer put
Yep.
the right sentence in the right section so it just makes some sense. And then the other is what we see as an administrative challenge.
In the original email, when we submitted that back last February, it did say, the email did say, we expected the legal lawyer an attorney to look at it, and, if there's any conflicting things or anything, hear back from it. And we didn't. The committee never heard anything. I put this forward because I was on the committee, like Mike, where I was on the committee when we put this together. And we sent it forward, and it's like it got lost in space. So I just thought, again, I want the town's advisory committee to be important, to be trusted, to be listened to be part of things. And I thought it was important enough to talk to you about it, to try to get it going. Whether the current advisory committee feels about it right now, I don't know. But most of those members that are on there now were part
We're
of
part of that effort.
this process, so.
And
So the question is, can I go back to them? And you just need a sense of yes.
yeah, because I wasn't sending it, sometimes I'll send stuff to town council, but this one I wasn't spending town council and spend money on unless I had the clear from the board, and the prior board was basically, nope, leave it alone. So what I want to do is get the first section off the town council. I haven't fixed the wordsmithing piece, reach out to Tony, have a conversation with him about what we see as the administrative challenge on the other piece. And everything else, frankly, we don't care about from the staff level.
Yep.
That's up to the advisory committee, the select board, and the meeting.
Okay, so yeah, we can go back to him, figure out what Tony would like and any issues with that. Next. Anything on that? Okay.
So,
Carter, you need some direction on CPC.
So, the last page here, just to give you a heads up. CPC, some money for Stonebridge Road. You authorized me to go there on that. some money to try to finish Scout Hall, some money for the Historical Society. Just wanted to give you a heads up on it. North County Land Trust. I am probably gonna talk to John Henshaw and see if there isn't some way to organize these into maybe just 2 articles or 1 article or some way, as opposed to having them
Okay.
as 5 articles. The other things for the warrant,
No issues with the CPC stuff, thanks.
Baldwinville School, as you know, we lost the developer there. It's been suggested that we seek permission to sell it. My sense is that the board is not gonna get authorization for a meeting without having some sense of how much we're getting and who's gonna use it and everything else. But I was asked to bring it in front of you as to whether or not you would seek permission from the meeting to sell it. I just don't see this town meeting giving you that authority without your ability to answer some questions.
Really don't understand. Could you, I don't 100% understand. So, deal fell through, it's now out there again.
Well, what we told you was we were gonna hold till after the overlay
Wanna do it?
zoning got approved, because we thought that would help improve the possibilities
Sure,
of getting rid of the
absolutely.
building.
Yep.
And that meant we'd have to wait till basically January 15. Don't wanna put it out there Thanksgiving, Christmas time. And we asked, in the memo of the weekly, if that was a problem to anybody, let us know, and we hadn't heard on anything, so we're assuming we'll hold the re-advertising until January of 2020.
You had a question?
Now, you can offer the building on your own, which we've done, but you can't sell it without a town meeting authorization. There are plenty of communities where I've worked where the selectmen go in and get permission to sell this building, that building, this piece of land, and the town meeting just sure fine, good luck. There are other towns where the folks in the town meeting are very actively engaged, and unless you can answer real questions about who are you selling it to, what's it gonna be used for, how much are you getting for it, are you gonna save the windows,
Yeah, it reminds me, I gotta talk to you about something.
you can't get approved, and so that's really, if you have the authority to sell it, that will make cutting a deal easier. Because then the buyers know you don't have to go back to the town meeting. So you need to balance that out. And that's our question. Where do you fall on
Terry,
that, so I know
Terry had a
whether or not
question.
to put it on the
So
warrant?
my question is, do we sell it and let can we rent it out? Like, could we turn it into something like the Orange Innovation Center, where we turn it into spaces that people can rent, or?
My
does it have
suggestion
to be
is
sold outright?
we get rid of it. We collectively, in this community, and in many small communities, are not good property managers. And I would do everything I could to discourage you from becoming a landlord. Again, your
My
decision.
second question was, did we vote $17,000 for a study on that building? Did we lose 17,000 in the deal on that building because the deal fell through?
Did you lose 17,000?
Yeah.
You paid for an appraisal, you paid for a survey, you paid for some title work. Those are basics that you have to be able to provide any purchaser or to dispose of the building.
Are they still good?
The survey's good, title's good, the appraisal will be good for a while.
Okay. So we didn't lose the money, we just have to, everything's still good that we spent the money on, but we got a little bit of a time crunch.
That's the cost of doing business.
Do you guys wanna wait until after the zoning? Basically, that's what we got in front of us. We can either ask the permission to sell preemptive, we don't have anything yet, but give us permission to buy it, or we can wait until after the zoning issue in January.
And so you'd be February before you had proposals. March, April, you'd be pretty close to the annual town meeting
Yes.
anyways.
That's what I thought.
So we'll hold that one?
Yeah, I thought we
Okay.
could hold.
Is that building winterized?
Have you seen my sheet on, did you read
You
sheet?
said that, yeah, you said we needed to vote on that winterization or
Oh,
something.
you
I did
skipped
read
ahead.
that.
What
I
sheet?
did read that.
We'll get there in just a moment.
Oh.
So, the last thing before I go to free cash,
Yep.
you'll remember the two parcels that we are trying to sell to the state, out by the, Terry, what's the name of? that?
Norcross Hill?
Norcross Hill, thank you. One is clean, one has a bad title, we have to condemn that one, take it by eminent domain. The state's seemingly a little squishy on whether or not they think we could do it all in one simultaneous closing. So they're, we'll know better on Monday. We have a conference call with them. There was a request that we go ahead and clear that title first in a completely separate transaction. If we have to go that way, I'll need around $17,000 plus or minus, two options. Option one is I go to the advisory committee, explain we had no clue this was coming, ask for a transfer from them. Option two is to ask for $17,000 at the town meeting. We get that money back eventually, but we'd plan to do it by selling parcel one, using the proceeds, condemn parcel two, sell them parcel two. And for some reason, one of the attorneys for the state's just feeling a little nervous about that.
What's
So,
their balance is what, 40?
yeah. Yeah. So, we think we're gonna get, around $40,000 for the sale of the two parcels, yes. So, on 3 pages in from the back, 3
So-
pages.
Did you get what you needed for us for that? I mean, I said it out loud, but I don't know
I'm just
how-
giving you a heads up, it's waiting for the conference call with the attorneys on
Okay.
Monday.
I'm leaning towards asking,
This?
to go to the advisory
Okay.
committee. and
I am
asking-
too, because I think it just makes a messy deal messier at the town meeting.
I agree. I don't know how anyone else feels on that, but,
Same.
I'd like to go to them.
So, we have, 1,455,000
Two pages.
certified. I will get to you a chart that shows the difference between certified free cash and what we call normal and ordinary without all these roll forwards. So, we're looking to backfill 2 accounts, possibly 3. The fire department, there was an accident with its ambulance, so the insurance company pays us. Problem is, I can't use that money to pay for the repair. That money goes into miscellaneous general revenues. So I need to backfill the fire department's budget, which has had to absorb the cost of these repairs.
Okay, I understand.
The town clerk has had $2,500, $3,000 in unanticipated expenses in staffing the 3 district meetings. And you may recall that we have one clerk that was separated from the service of the town late in fiscal 19, in part over errors. They did not advertise a zoning issue correctly, and it's curable, but it requires that we publish a large ad in the Gardner News, and we do some other things, and the cost of that's a little over
Yeah, I did
$700.
actually see the language on that.
It's a little over $700 there. Next, we would like to become more aggressive on tax title. I know this is kind of counterintuitive, trying to add some money to budgets that we'll end up cutting shortly after that. But we really need to become more aggressive on tax title. We've talked with you and with the advisory committee a little bit about how much it costs to do these. And we're holding our own. We're finally getting them advertised on time. We're getting them leaned on time, but we aren't getting enough of them into land court to quiet the title and foreclose the right of redemption. You'll remember that the Main Street Bridge was narrowed to 1 lane.
Yep.
Last year. Best estimate is a repair cost slightly north of $2.25 million. Depends upon how good the piers are, the abutments. Is it considered to have the appropriate width by today's design standards? So on and so forth. Originally, we'd hoped to do a repair for $150,000. That would buy us 3 or 4 years till we could get to fiscal '24, at which time you have debt coming off the books that we could then divert to the bridge. Unfortunately, the repairs actually would cost around $350,000, and they wouldn't be salvageable. They wouldn't be part of the permanent final repair. You'd really be wasting all that money. So we want to ask, and we spoke to Capital about it the other night very briefly, $200,000 for the design and permitting. We think we can get to about 70% design with that. Again, that depends upon the assumptions we've made on the width and the structural condition of the piers and everything else. Our hope would be to be ready in August for the MassWorks grant program, which is an economic development program with Seaman Paper right there. We think would be a reasonable candidate for that program. More importantly, trying to move Main Street Bridge along. The only suitable detour that's really good is Hamlin Street, I believe. Hamlet, is that? Hamlet. That has a bridge which also has a lot of challenges on it, and if we were to lose both bridges at the same time, we'd just have some real challenges. The school declared surplus Baldwinville Elementary School. They haven't sent us a letter. We don't know if it's
We
vacated.
haven't toured it yet,
Didn't know it was mine yet till I get the letter,
right?
and that's,
Yeah,
That's supposed to be done by October 19th. I'm just telling you what I've heard at their meetings.
and
but
I'm
we
just,
have nothing that's said it's been declared. There's no been a
It's-
formal declaration.
it's theirs until they deliver the formal declaration,
Right.
and it's vacated.
Okay.
But, to Terry's question, I do need to weatherize it. We have two
Yeah.
choices: continue to heat it, horrible cost, or we go in there with a plumber, you
Winterize it.
open up as many pipes as you can, you cut a few, you force compressed air through everything you can find to try to bleed it. You dump antifreeze in every trap that you think you can identify it, and then you live with the damage that you're gonna have as a result.
And hopefully there's none if they do it right.
And hopefully there's not a
On the
lot if
plumber's
they
dollar.
do it right, but
Okay.
that never happens.
Shh, you're jinxing it, stop.
Diane had asked previously about the regional agreement and the like. If you want to move forward now, we would need special counsel. I don't think we have time to sort that all out at this point. We may need to
I would agree with you. I
just
think
spend the money out of the legal
we're
budget.
We're
and then-
trying. I mean, I think we're building up steam on it, but yeah, I agree with you.
I think what you'll need to do is to consider bringing in special counsel, paying them out of the legal budget, and then backfilling it at the
Okay.
annual town meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
We think we're gonna be 160,000 short on snow and ice. Remember,
That's exactly.
we're going to all salt, which I think we already previously told you would probably blow about a $65,000 hole in your budget. There are terrific reasons of why to do this. And it will have some payback in reduced catch basin cleaning, in reduced sweeping, in longer life on both of those machines. But it does cost money.
To do it.
We do have, for the first time, I think it's 3 pieces of equipment Jeff signed up at this point, which will put, if we can't hire that worker, they'll get that route. Otherwise, they'll get
Yeah.
added to some of the other routes. Anticipated backfills, a reserve for capital, which leaves 382. The policy says we split that in half, and we send off to the operating stabilization, 132, which will bring you to 709,000. Not a lot, but a eightfold increase, I think, over what we all entered with. An increase to the CapEx and an increase to the OPEB. I will say that as these things get closer to their targets, I would be encouraging the town to raise the limits, so that you're contributing closer to 12% to the operating stabilization as opposed to 5. 5% is just nothing. You'll be there in another year. And it's not gonna shield you in a true economic
Yeah.
downturn. So that's where we're headed, and we wanted to answer questions,
Yeah,
make adjustments.
the back, I think everything looks good. What's the backfills? Can you explain the FY '20 backfills?
We don't know just yet. We're gonna cut it looks like we're headed to cut $20,000 out of the highway budget. I just had a truck the other day that was $8,000.
Oh, gosh.
And remember, we're getting deeper into the year.
Yeah,
So
you
we
know,
always just
and,
have things,
Would you consider,
Go
as part of
wrong.
the backfills, like, Rich Curtis told me that I know they're supposed to get the ambulance, but he's got that, the blue.
we
the Air
actually have
Force.
monies for that.
Yeah,
in
because
the
he thought it was gonna be
transition
about
budget.
$800 to change the radiator again.
We have money in
Okay.
another line item. If you'll remember, the town meeting gave us $15,000 to,
Yes,
uh,
augment that truck or the.
refresh those dominoes.
Yep.
And when the ambulance was freed up, to get it all stripped, cleaned,
Yeah.
re-logoed. And so we're preserving this till next spring. We consider that
Yeah.
part of the transition.
He just asked for that, and I
because
said
we
that
have
I
no
would,
place else to take the money.
that takes part of it.
Yep.
But it's, they're very thin on their trucks, obviously, we know that going into the capital thing, but if they can get that fixed, then at least they're starting this winter season with what they need.
I mean, we have things that come up every day. We have a sink in the senior center used for crafts. Doesn't comply with ADA.
Oh, okay.
So,
What was it? It was, they just had a fire
I don't have any
and the
other
chief
questions on
wanted
this,
us
do you?
to do rehab and we didn't have the blue
You good with
truck.
this?
I don't remember that, but,
It was a week
I mean, I
ago.
can't identify it any better than that at this point.
I have no further questions on that.
I have no questions.
So here's the real bad news.
Oh,
Boy.
I will get you the rough draft when I send it out to town council, but it will probably be late Monday, or even early Tuesday morning before I get them the draft. I really do have, I have a head start, but I had a couple other things I was working on this week. And then town council, I've already given him the heads up, that he may not get it till noon Tuesday, and I'll need it back by close of business. Otherwise, I'd have to ask you for another special meeting to
Right.
adopt a thing.
Well, I mean, I'm certainly glad we met tonight, if we had so much to do. We weren't even supposed to meet tonight, so that's good.
it wasn't an emergency.
Well, truthfully, if we hadn't met tonight because of the school, I would have been working on the warrant.
Yeah.
And
All right.
Sorry, Carter.
it's not a problem. I just,
Anything else?
I just need people to understand that the schools really are taking up a lot of time.
Yeah.
Anything else, Carter?
That's all I had for tonight.
Okay. Bob, anything? Okay. Terry, let her rip.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Oh, I'm sorry, I had a comment.
Oh, okay.
So I would just like to encourage the public to come on Tuesday. Your voice really matters this time. I know that there's been several other meetings, but I feel that, based on the meetings that I've been to with the school committee, that this time they're making a decision. And it may not be at the 19-8, and that, we will be heard. And that we are here on your behalf, and we will make that motion on the floor for 19-5. Thank you.
Now?
Yes.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion to adjourn's been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you for your patience.